So good afternoon, everyone. I am so pleased to be here this afternoon to welcome you. My name is Chia Vang. I'm the Vice Chancellor for Community Empowerment and Institutional Inclusivity, also a history faculty member. As someone who has taught for 17 years at this institution, who is now an administrator leading all kinds of efforts to build a campus community that allows everyone, regardless of their perspectives and backgrounds, to grow, learn, and thrive. I am so honored to welcome you to the Renewing Our Civic Culture initiative. This is our first event. The Renewing Our Civic Culture initiative is designed to demonstrate how respectful dialogue across differing perspectives can help to bridge divides, reduce affective polarization, and foster empathy. By encouraging deeper mutual understanding and highlighting common values and concerns, this effort aims to strengthen the fabric of our civic community. This division of Community Empowerment and Institutional Inclusivity in our Division of Student Affairs. This is a collaboration between our division in collaboration with many other academic departments. I do want to acknowledge the two individuals who actually conceived this idea of renewing our civic culture. They don't know that I'm going to do this, but Dr. Jill Butney, Associate Teaching Professor in the college, Honors College, could you stand up so we can recognize you? Okay. And Dr. Sarah McDonough, who's our Training and Dispute Resolution Specialist. When you work with great people with great ideas, they make you look good. So we've held many freedom of expression events over the course of the last few years. So we are especially excited to celebrate our civil dialogue table, which is out there. If you haven't had a chance to see it, one of our faculty members, Dr. Sergio Lopez Pinero, and his student, a Master of Architecture student, Alec Regan, designed the table, the civil dialogue table. So if you haven't had a chance, please take a look at it before you go. It's just around the corner. I really promise you it's over there. So. We are also very pleased to amplify a number of different student-led civil dialogue initiatives on campus. So there's a information table over there. It is to my right, just before the registration table. Please take a look at what our students are leading, especially the Bridging the Divide, which is also supported by the funder who is supporting this event today. And now I want to say that this event would not have been possible without the support of the Tommy Thompson Center for Public Leadership. The Thompson Center, especially Alec Tack, I believe he might be joining us today, the director of the center. I don't believe Alec has arrived yet, but just want to thank them, the staff of the center, Ruth and Lily as well. They work very hard across the state to make sure that these kinds of dialogues, these kinds of civic engagement opportunities are available to everyone across the UW system. For those who are not familiar with the Thompson Center, and if you're not from Wisconsin, but if you're from Wisconsin, you cannot not know who Governor Thompson was. So let me say a few words about the center. The Thompson Center was established to follow in the footsteps of Governor Tommy Thompson, who proudly worked with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to advance the public good. The Thompson Center seeks to carry out Governor Thompson's legacy by informing and inspiring current and future public leaders, fostering leadership skills, and promoting effective public leadership. They work to further these goals by offering public events, funding research and scholarships, honoring exemplary public leaders with the Distinguished Public Leadership Award, and conducting other activities across all UW campuses. All the events are free and open to the public. If you don't know much about the center, please visit their website. I also want to acknowledge that these kinds of events would not be possible without a number of academic partners because they are instrumental in sponsoring our students. So we are deeply grateful to the Honors College, the Department of Political Science, the Department of Philosophy, and the Classics program for co-sponsoring the event today. So most importantly, I say thank you to each and every one of you who are sitting in this room and those of you joining virtually for spending your Friday afternoon and evening with us. Thank you so much for being here. Here's a brief overview of what will take place today. Our distinguished speaker will speak for about 20, 25 minutes, and then we will follow that up with a conversation that he will have with Dr. Liz Drame, who's a professor of teaching and learning, and she serves as a special assistant in the division that I lead. They'll have a conversation about the topics that he'll be sharing with us. And then Dr. Sarah McDonough will help us understand how the dinner discussions will work. She'll give us instructions as we get to it. And then we will close near the end of the dinner with some words, closing remarks from our Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, Kelly Hang. So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Dr. Jed Atkins is the inaugural director and dean of the School of Civic Life and Leadership at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where he also holds the Taylor Grandy Distinguished Professorship on the Philosophy of Living. Prior to assuming this position in March 2024, Dr. Atkins was at Duke University as the E. Blake Byrne Associate Professor of Classical Studies and an Associate Professor of Philosophy and Political Science. He directed Duke's Civil Discourse Project, which sponsors scholarly activities that promote civil discourse through modeling or teaching the capacities and virtues necessary to engage in healthy exchange across differences. He was also faculty director of the Transformative Ideas Program for sophomores, which includes an initiative on civic life and thought. Dr. Atkins' scholarly expertise includes Greek and Roman political and moral philosophy, the history of political thought, and contemporary debates on tolerance, civility, and civil discourse. He is the author or co-editor of 4 books, most recently, The Christian Origins of Tolerance, published in 2024 by Oxford University Press. He earned his master's in master in political thought and intellectual history and his PhD in classics, both from the University of Cambridge, and his bachelor's in government and classics from Bowdoin College. Now, please join me in extending a UWM welcome to Dr. Jed Atkins.
Well, thank you so much, Kia, for that kind introduction and for all of your hard work in organizing this, and as well as Jill and Sarah. So appreciative of and honored to be able to be here to kick off this wonderful initiative that you're doing this year on civic culture, which I think is so important. And so I'm grateful to be here today, and I'm excited to be here with you today because we're going to talk about something that seems to many people impossible in our highly polarized political environment. We're going to talk about how to have constructive conversations with people who disagree with us. If you're in this room or watching online, you're in a position to change the conversation in your own area of influence, in your classroom, in your home, in your apartment or your place of work. That's how we sustain our participatory democracy for another 250 years. That's how we solve problems. That's how we build community. That's how we combat the pandemic of loneliness and isolation through civic discourse. Those are just some of the virtues of civic discourse, but what is civil discourse? Let me start by dispelling a myth. Civil discourse is not synonymous with polite speech. Sometimes critics of civil discourse dismiss it because they think we're asking people to be polite, when maybe people should be angry or should be sad or some other emotional response. That's to misunderstand what civil discourse is and what it asks of us. Now, I'm a classicist, and I'm delighted that tonight is one of our co-sponsors is by the Classics program here. The word civil comes from the Latin word civillus, which means civic, public, or political. Civillus is connected to the word from which we get citizen. So speech that is civil or civillus is that which pertains to other citizens. Or more broadly, civil discourse is speech addressed to fellow citizens as members of a common community. My former Duke colleague, Deandra Rose, prefers the term civic discourse to stress that civil speech does not necessarily mean polite speech. At the heart of civil discourse is the commitment to working out our differences with words, not violence. As the Roman statesman and defender of the republican government by the people, Cicero once memorably wrote, "One proceeds by deliberation, the other by violent force." By deliberation, Cicero meant the careful consideration of arguments and viewpoints looking at all sides of a disputed matter before making up your mind and then acting on the basis of evidence. Of course, none of us are infallible, so we do the best we can. But even after we make up our mind, we should be prepared to revise our opinion if new or better evidence or perspectives comes to light. But Cicero thought that the alternative to shared deliberation between members of a common community can often be violence. Cicero's point, I think, is key to recognizing the cultural meaning of the killing of Charlie Kirk on a college campus earlier this semester. Kirk was assassinated while participating in the act of public dialogue, in the act of taking and responding to questions from the audience. And the setting of Kirk's murder reminds us of Cicero's point. The dark alternative to persuasion is force. Where discourse breaks down, violence often follows. The alternative to dialogue is not merely the quiet retreat into our private lives, it is often war. It really feels like we're at a breaking point sometimes, doesn't it? Consider these recent findings. America is polarizing faster than any other major democracy. Most Republicans and Democrats believe that members of their respective political outgroups are immoral. 84% of adults say political debate has become less respectful over the last several years. Universities bring together diverse people into a shared community. So they and we have the potential to solve political polarization. But so far, we generally haven't been living up to this great potential. More than half of college students say they self-censor when discussing social and political issues with their peers. 1 in 3 college students believe that it's acceptable to use violence to stop a speaker, at least on some occasions, up from 1 in 5 in 2020. 1 in 4 college or university faculty feel they can't express their opinion on a subject which is greater than during the McCarthy era. These statistics are gloomy. But if you're at this talk, there's a good chance you share my dissatisfaction with the status quo. You want the situation to change. And the good news is there is reason for hope. Universities can be central to the solution, and you can be part of that solution. This afternoon, I'm going to give you some tools to think differently and take action to live differently. Now, here's the thing about hope. Hope is not the same as optimism. Optimism says, well, things will work out eventually if we just stay back and let circumstances unfold. Things will trend in a good direction. But from the stats I just read, it's not clear that when it comes to civic discourse, that things are trending in a good direction. And it would be disingenuous of me to ask you to think that that's the case. But thankfully, hope doesn't ask you to believe that things are going in a good direction. Hope is the conviction that things can be better and turn around even when things might be trending in a bad direction. Hope looks forward expectantly to a better way of living. Hope is consistent with the patient action to bring about this better way of living, especially when circumstances look bleak. So when I give you some reasons for hope for better civic discourse, I'm not going to back away from the challenges, but I want to show you how we can think about these challenges differently so that we can overcome them together. So I've been told this afternoon there's going to be some students in the audience. Raise your hand if you're a student. Okay, good. On a Friday afternoon, coming out for a talk and dinner. Thank you. Well, I'm going to focus my remarks on why students are an important reason for hope, okay? I'm going to get into this that way. That's how I'm going to focus my remarks. Last year at UNC, we did a survey of 130 first-year students randomly selected to be part of an orientation program. And what the survey revealed was this. It revealed that the students' desire to participate in civil discourse, in conversations with people that disagree with them, far surpassed their confidence in their ability to do that. So when we asked them, do you want to do this? Do you want to have conversations with people that disagree with you across politics or religion or questions of science, ethics? The answer was yes. It was really high. We do. And when we asked them, well, how confident or prepared are you? The answer was really low. The students held back, not because they didn't want it, but because they thought that they were not ready. And it's just not at Chapel Hill. Surveys over the past few years, national surveys have shown that as many as 81% of students want to be exposed to a wider range of ideas in college. 94% of students want their university to do something to promote civil discourse. Only 6% believe that the universities don't need to adopt any solutions. So if you're a student at this talk, there's a really good chance that you want to learn something about how to have conversations that disagree with you, and you want your university to be doing events like this. But there's also a really good chance, if you're a student here, that you're worried about how to do it. Because if we follow the surveys, there's a good chance that if you're a student, you're worried about what other students might think. 40% of students blame other students for stifling speech. Not their professors, but other students. You worry about social pressure. What will your classmates think if they hear that you're arguing for view X or Y? You worry, what if they think badly about me? What if they don't invite me to social events? There might be professional risks. You know, we all walk around with these little recording devices in our pockets. And, you know, because of smartphones, anything that you say inside the classroom, outside the classroom might be recorded. It might be reported to future employers. It might be reported to current employers. So it's no surprise that for many students doing the risk-reward analysis, the civil discourse is just not worth it. And so here's the tension that so many students feel. You want to have productive conversations with people who are different than you, who think differently than you, who have different backgrounds than you, but you recognize there's real risks. But you know, these risks aren't new. Smartphones and social media, okay, they're new technology, but the underlying social pressures have been known for millennia. Did you know that Roman emperors knew about these social pressures that dampened civil discourse, and they used them to keep their subjects in check? They established laws against treason, which punished arbitrary political speech and action, and they incentivized citizens and subjects to report on each other, even their friends and family members. And this divided people and isolated people, and it kept them from the problem-solving deliberation that government by the people, Republican government, needed to solve problems. And of course, that was just the point, right? They wanted to hold power because Republican government, government by the people, requires energetic citizens who can act and think together and solve problems. In a pluralistic civic body like the United States has, Republican government means we need to think and act constructively across difference. So the stakes are high for us. But there's grounds for hope. Risks can be lessened and risk takers can be rewarded. The Romans didn't get it right. The Roman Republic ended. But we can learn from their mistakes. First, Rome's check on civic discourse worked because there were unclear expectations about political speech. It was unclear what could be said. It was arbitrary. The good news is we have the First Amendment, which gives us the freedom of speech. Now, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee has collected these resources on a website called Free Speech Rights and Actions. It's a wonderful website. This website gives you information about your rights and responsibilities and provides some really good action guiding resources. It gives advice on how to organize events. It explains First Amendment law, including the relationship between free speech rights and time, place, and manner restrictions, content neutral time, place, and manner restrictions. Your university leaders should be commended on making these resources and policies very clear, and by giving you directions and support for how to host a speaker on campus or a campus event. If you're a student here and you want to make a difference, take your university up on this. You might host an event showing the reasoned discussion about a controversial issue. There's groups that work with students and administrators who can do this well. For instance, Braver Angels provides a model which helps students actively organize, and not just organize, but participate in the discussion from beginning to end on topics like race and immigration, abortion, gun control, and so many more topics that the students themselves might choose. That might be their issues, their topics. Now, hosting an event like this might seem to be taking a risk, but if there's clear communication with a supportive administration, it will be worth it. Experience has taught me that one key virtue for civil discourse is courage, and one of its greatest hindrances is fear. Courage and fear are like viruses. They spread quickly. Right now, fear and cowardice are spreading in our country all over the place. But with some practice, commitments, and good hygiene, courage can spread just as quickly. And that's what students can do by hosting an event on a difficult topic. You can spread courage. Clear policies and institutional support relieve the risk, some of the risk, and give reason for courage. And I'm going to share a story with you. Last year at my university, we decided to put civil discourse to the test. We had success in teaching a course on civil discourse, and we thought that we should equip our students to talk about the most difficult issue on campus at the time. And you can imagine what that was, Israel and Palestine. So we did our homework. My team talked to Muslim and Jewish campus groups. We recruited a diverse team of course leaders, arranged for a wonderfully diverse group of visiting speakers, and even a trip to Israel and the West Bank to meet Jews and Palestinians affected by the conflicts. But then it came time to roll out the course and announce it. There's a principle that I heard from a provost at another university, a principle that was learned by this person through hard experience. When there is careful planning and coordination between different parts of the university around a controversial speaker or topic, the event will succeed. Things get out of kilter when communication and planning breaks down. So I'm going to put that principle to the test, I thought. I'm going to stake my claim to this. So I reached out to our campus chancellor, Lee Roberts, and I said, Chancellor, we're about to advertise this course. You know, it's on a very controversial topic. There might be some controversy. Can I have your support? He called me in his office next morning. He said, absolutely. What do you need? And I said, I could really use someone on your team to help me steer traffic and get all this alignment, because if we have everyone aligned, this will be a great success. He said, absolutely, you can have the support of my deputy chief of staff. And as a result of that, the course was a success. And a wonderfully diverse group of students on campus had a life-changing experience as they successfully leaned in to a very challenging issue. Clear policies, procedures, and administrative support can help universities tackle even the most challenging topics. It's one way of removing fear and reducing the disincentives that students might feel to engage in political discourse. But, and this is one reason why I love this new series, reducing the incentives, the disincentives for political discourse and promoting it has to go beyond policy. It has to get into culture. It has to get into how members of a community relate to each other. This capacity to speak freely with one's peers within a community requires the commitment of all members of the community. Free speech is a gift that we give to each other. Free speech is a gift that we give to each other. The gift of free exchange is another way of saying civil discourse. Well, how can a community, whether a classroom or student organization, give one another the gift of civil discourse? They can practice Chatham House Rule. What this means is that participants at an event can say who attended and what the topic of conversation was, but they can't attribute particular views to particular people. This arrangement counters the fear that students have about other students reporting on them. They each recognize that if they remove the fear and anxiety about having to get it just right because your view might be reported, if they remove that anxiety and fear, they're going to learn more. They're going to generate better ideas and insights. And maybe most of all, valuable, they're going to grow in trust and friendship with people in their community and have more fun. My colleagues and I have found that students themselves want to follow the Chatham House rules because they don't want to let each other down. Another way in which students can give the gift of civil discourse to one another is learning to practice what's sometimes called the principle of charity. Listen well to others and try to understand their arguments and concerns. Interpret others' words so that they convey their arguments in its best and strongest form. And when you criticize an idea, focus on the idea or the argument itself, not the person who said it. We can also practice intellectual humility. Recognize that we're all learning and we're all growing, even your professors. And we learn together and we learn from one another. If we focus on the shared goal of learning and growing in knowledge, in understanding the truth about our world, about ourselves, about our society, it will be much easier to admit when we're wrong. It'll be much easier to patiently consider others' views, even if they don't seem right at first, or ever. Aim at truth, not victory. Students who practice these principles can do amazing things. They can lead dialogue groups, for instance, successfully. I've seen it, and I'm going to share another story with you. Several years ago, I worked with Residential Life at my university to set up a civil discourse residential hall. The idea was there's an affinity that holds people together, and that affinity is civil discourse. The fact that they're friends, not despite, but because of their disagreements and their differences. We were committed to giving students agency to have their own conversations. And I connected this residential hall that had a beautiful common room with a class. And the class was called The Good Life, Religion, Philosophy of Life's Ultimate Questions, comparing different religious and philosophical traditions, everything from scientific naturalism to Buddhism to Christianity to Islam to Judaism. There are different answers on life's big questions, things like justice, things like death, things like suffering. And so that's what the course was about. And in the discussion groups were led not by TAs, graduate TAs, or professors, but by students. And they followed some of the principles that we talked about, and they helped those in the group practice them. And it was an amazing success. Listen to the answers of 2 survey questions. I asked the students at the end to rank the following statements from 1 to 5, 1 being not at all, 5 being very much. My dialogue group leader facilitated an environment where I felt free to share my views. 4.95 out of 5 was the average. And I'm even more proud of this. The first one said they could speak freely and say what was on their mind. The second, through the dialogue group, I came better to understand, even if I disagreed with, views of those different from my own. And here the average was 4.6. So in other words, yeah, I disagree with you, but I learned something from you on religion, politics, ethics, morality. The student discussion leaders and participants were not any different than any of you. This afternoon. They practiced some basic principles, the Chatham House Rule, the principle of charity. They aimed at truth, not victory. And they engaged in intellectual hospitality. Oh, another virtue, hospitality. Hospitality also is another word that comes from a Latin word that means guest or host or stranger. And I told the student dialogue group leaders that their goal is to play the host in order to make the strangers in this class enter as guests to form for a time intellectual community. And they had a little tiny budget for food. In their case, it was like if they met in the morning, it was like, maybe some donuts, something, And food is very, as you all recognize tonight, food is essential for civic dialogue. Because one thing that I learned in having these conversations is that it's very difficult to dehumanize somebody when you're doing the very human act You're participating in the very shared human act of eating together. And over the years, I've witnessed food make possible some of the most powerful moments that I've seen around constructive conversations around issues as challenging as race and policing or Middle Eastern politics. And the more I reflect on civil discourse, the more I find students' capacity to engage in it to be related to a deeper human capacity. And this surprises people. It surprised me. I didn't think I'd ever frame this part this way. But a type of intellectual play. When we think about play, sometimes we think it's synonymous to what's frivolous. But play is actually a fundamental part of human development. Imagine children who never played. Their development would be stunted, and there would be ways in which they wouldn't mature. To learn to entertain others' points of view, to try on others' perspectives, to imagine for a moment the world, what the world would be like if somebody else's point was right. All of those things that are necessary for the principle of charity, that all requires a type of intellectual play, a type of imagination. And here, there's a metaphor of play that I've given to students over the years that they found very helpful. And it works like this. Play doesn't come easy. It takes practice, as anyone who's played an instrument knows, or been a member of a sports team knows. At first, you're clumsy. You hit the wrong notes. Or in basketball, I'm from a land of basketball down at Tobacco Road, North Carolina, and so I use basketball. You pass to the wrong player. You have to think hard when you're learning to play about every single step. But as you gain skill and experience, it comes a little more easily. And the same is true with civil discourse. Most of us get very uncomfortable and just not used to disagreeing well and constructively about hard issues, about matters of religion, science, politics, all the things that we disagree about. It can make us feel very uncomfortable. And we can make a point inartfully at first, causing confusion or anger, or even hurt. Much as in a basketball game, we might miss that wide open player under the basket for an easy layup and throw the pass out of bounds, evoking the consternation of our teammates. Sometimes this will happen, but when it does, can you practice the principle of charity? Can you ask a question of that person who is inartful? I don't understand your point. Could you clarify what you meant by that? Or move the conversation forward by finding a helpful kernel in what they said that advances the conversation, the same way a coach might say to that player who missed the open player under the basket, good read, meaning you saw where to pass the ball, you just messed up on the execution. The same way that basketball teams require practice, so civil discourse is a team game. Think about what I said before. Civil discourse, or the freedom of expression, is a gift that we give to one another. And sometimes you work on this in private, under conditions of Chatham House rule. Other times, we have public events, lectures, or debate. Just like in basketball, sometimes you have the public game, sometimes you have the private practice. But the important point is you're learning and growing and improving along with other people. You and your teammates will never be identical, and that's the great thing about civil discourse. What would a basketball team be like with 5 centers? It wouldn't win. And of course, you'll never play a perfect game. But together with hard work, you'll grow in your capacity to understand the world around you and to make better decisions individually and collectively. And that ultimately is why universities are very well suited as training grounds of democratic speech. Universities are large, complex, diverse institutions, but not nearly as large and complex and diverse as a country like the United States of America. In a large republic, it can be really hard for me as a North Carolinian to imagine what it might like to be engaged with a common enterprise with somebody really far away. But the university provides its members different types of forums for offering different types of speech, depending on their purpose and what you're trying to achieve. So for instance, in the classroom, students participate as community members that are maybe trying to find out truth or discover knowledge. In student government, the students are deliberating about school policies. In other campus spaces, students recruit for their organizations, they demonstrate, they attend and speak on panels, and so much more. In offering these and other types of fora, universities direct speech to different and more specific goods than the civil discourse when we're trying to figure out what's good national policy, but still, speech that tries to advance in truth and knowledge among a plurality of views in a classroom for instance, can have the great byproduct of training students to engage in civil discourse with their fellow students in a broader civic community. By learning to speak as members of the smaller classroom community, students develop capacities and gain knowledge useful for participating in the larger communities of city and state and country. And this education is vital. At no moment is the commitment to reasoned conversation among different perspectives more important than present. As we look forward to the 250th anniversary of our republic, we're reminded by current events about the fragility of our Republican form of government. Republican government, government by the people, is hard. But in conclusion, another warning from the Roman experience. The Roman Republic lasted for 500 years, nearly 500 years. Romans, so we're halfway there. Romans, like Americans, disagreed passionately throughout the history of the Republic. That wasn't the problem. The death of the Roman Republic was marked not by political disagreement, but by losing the common vocabulary to even talk to one another about important matters. The death of the Republic was marked by civil silence. And so let that be a challenge for us. Let's bear with the noise. Continue speaking, debating, reasoning, and listening patiently to other members in our community. Let's continue to give one another the gift of free speech and civic discourse. As long as we do that, I think we have a good bet to maintain our Republican form of government for another 250 years. Thank you. I want to grab that.
Hello, everybody can hear? Thank you so much, Jed, for such a, I think, timely and really comprehensive discussion on what civil discourse is, how important it is, and how important the university is to being a space for civil discourse. My name is Dr. Liz Drame. I'm a professor in the Department of Teaching and Learning here at UWM. I'm also special assistant to Dr. Chia Vang, who's the Vice Chancellor of the Division of Institutional Inclusivity and Community Empowerment. I'm also a mother. I'm a mother of two young adults, excuse me, a 25-year-old son who's in the US Army, and a 21-year-old who is currently a student at Mount Mary. And this topic is near and dear to my heart because we have so many conversations, and one of the things that my children are always talking about is this need to be able to have conversations where it doesn't result in like a total destruction of a relationship or violence, right? And universities, as you stated so eloquently, that universities are a place, liberal arts institutions are a place where these opportunities for students to develop their civil discourse skill and to practice it, it's here. It's in spaces like here, and yet universities are experiencing a lot of attacks, political attacks, ideological attacks, attacks on the very liberal arts education that we promote for our students. And so how do you see these attacks, these pressures affecting the ability of universities to continue to foster spaces where students can build and practice civil discourse skills?
Well, thanks, Liz. It's great to be in conversation with you, and you're a mother of two. I'm a father of two. Mine are a little bit behind, 11 and 13. So we're entering into, to this stage. Yeah, I mean, as you would have gathered from my talk, and I'm going to make this maybe what was implicit more explicit, I think that at the heart of civil discourse is a robust commitment to the liberal arts. And by what I mean by that is to have conversation across difference. There's something deeply human in that. And so part of what we have to do is be able to recover the capacity to regain one another and speak to one another as human beings. And we can do that by examining big questions about justice, questions about how we deal with suffering and dying, some of these perennial questions that help us engage as human beings. It's also embedded of what I say with civics is it has to do with the citizen. And to be a citizen is to have to be able to work out problems in a community, which requires engagement with a range of types of knowledge in a range of type of people, and to be able to reason and think together. All of that requires the liberal arts. So while I think there's some best practices to be able to engage with, I don't, we can talk about the principle of charity, we can talk about the principle of intellectual humility. I think for a fully orbed account of civic discourse, I think that a liberal arts education is very, very, very useful. And so I think that for those of us who are committed to civil discourse and the liberal arts, which is committed to both of those. I think that there's an argument. I think the time is now for sort of a robust defense and argument of the liberal arts as something that can provide, generalist citizens at a time when we need to have the capacity to engage with one another, and that's being challenged. So I think with all of the challenges that we have in a university, the answer is to really have a robust defense of the liberal arts as a necessary solution for the crisis of civility. I think if those things can go together, I think we will be able to help our universities be in a much stronger position.
I think that's so critical because right now, subjects like history, philosophy, political science, anthropology, all of those liberal arts, humanities are really kind of being seen as not as important as STEM disciplines or disciplines that are kind of tied to professions, right? We need to prepare people for jobs. So we need to prepare people to become a nurse or an engineer or whatever. And we have many STEM professors who kind of don't necessarily see civil discourse as being part of what they need to do because they see their disciplines like physics, mechanical engineering or whatever as very technical, right? So what would you say to this idea that STEM fields aren't really an important place to foster civil discourse skills, particularly as we know that science, technology, engineering, math, all of those fields are actually becoming more collaborative, more interdisciplinary, and also fields where there's lots of ethical complexity, right? How would you speak to professors of those fields who say, "Hey, that's not our job"?
Well, Liz, your introduction to that question is really important, and I'm gonna say something about the evolution of civic education. I'm gonna speak directly to the STEM. What's so fascinating is that if you think about the civic education, let's say over the last 150, 200 years, it's happened in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different places. It used to be just part of what liberal arts did, and then in the late 19th century, with the rise of the research university, where you took the German research university and you melded it on top of liberal arts college, you had the introduction of departments. So then different departments would take it on. So let's say if you were to look at the American History Association statement, or let's say around 100 years ago, you would say that educating for citizens is one of the things that professional historians saw themselves as doing. Same thing with the American Political Science Association. And then there was kind of a movement, away from that and into service learning and so on, and we've kind of gotten to a point where it's like, who does it? Who owns it, right? And it's like, does anyone own it or nobody owns it? And one of the challenges with saying everyone owns it is that nobody owns it. And so, I think my solution would be, let's have the liberal arts, those humanities and social sciences, really own it, because they're, especially in the gen ed curriculum, because they're the ones that are doing the deeply human and the deeply civic and it's really hard. It's hard for specialists to do that. But let's have faculty in those fields begin to see as part of what they do. You're going to want to make some narrow advances in your own areas of scholarship. But as far as the general ed, let's take it on ourselves, those of us who are in these fields, to make civic education part of our remit. Okay. And so I don't think to go directly to your questions, I don't think, we should have, cell biologists teaching civil discourse, or just trying to do a little bit in their class. We need to have something that's much more deeper and iterative inside of the classroom, outside of the classroom. So I don't want to get us into a place where we're just trying to have every single member of the university do a pinch of civil discourse and think that we solved the problem, because we're not. But your point is right with the interdisciplinary movement of some of these. And so what I'd like is those of us who are training citizens to be thoughtful citizens, to be training generalists, that then the specialists in the STEM are going to need what the generalists are giving them and be able to take those skills into their labs. But we can also find some ways for those people who are in colleagues who are in STEM fields to also be able to signify that civil discourse is important. And you can do that through a couple of different ways. One is by taking some of those professors and everyone who have the aptitude and the ability to join some team talk courses on civil discourse areas. I've had seen some amazing things happen with colleagues in the past. I've had a computer scientist who taught an amazing course with a philosopher on human flourishing in a digital age, thinking about the role of technology in the human good. And by having a very prominent computer scientist, and of course those majors are exploding, they're not hurting for professors or funding, but by having a very prominent professor saying, yeah, this is important, right? Even though the computer science department's not doing civic education, by having one person do that, it sends volumes. I've seen evolutionary biologists teaching courses on life's purpose along with philosophers and so on. And so I think that there's ways in which, without saying that the STEM departments have to carry the burden or even most of the burden of this work, they can at the very least signal that it's really important. And then departments who are in better places to do this work can step up and really make sure that our students get this rich experience both inside and outside of the classroom.
I wasn't sure how you're going to answer that question. I really appreciate that, because I feel like there's so many questions that move beyond the technical within many STEM disciplines, and to look at it from an interdisciplinary, a collaborative standpoint, where people can say, okay, these algorithms that large language models are based on for artificial intelligence actually have some real human implications. I might not be able, as an expert in that field, to be able to facilitate discourse around that, but in collaboration with someone else in humanities or social sciences, I can help provide an opportunity for students to be able to grapple with those issues.
Yeah, and that's a really important point that you make, right? AI is here. Most people say, it's here to stay, and so what do we do with AI as we're thinking about civil discourse? I have a visiting professor who has done a lot of work on civil discourse and artificial intelligence as a philosopher, and he's experimenting. And this person has, it's very exciting work that he's doing, but also this person has a certain view of the human person and reasoning that underlies this work, right? And this view can be something that you might want to interrogate, right? And he would want you to interrogate it, right? Let's be open about that. And so that requires, that requires us to think about the role of reason in the fully orbed life and how we make decisions. And so I think, it shows that, it's, even thinking about the role of AI, we should be open and have people reason together about some of the presuppositions, right? Even as we're thinking about what the technology can do. And that means there's a crucial role for the humanities, interpersonal social sciences, and it's also crucial that those people that are working on artificial intelligence are in conversation with those of us who are in the humanities and social sciences. So your question is wonderful, and it also shows that that our interdisciplinary nature of our world makes the humanities and social sciences as important as ever before, even as we move forward with important initiatives in STEM.
So I want to shift a little bit. This idea of civil discourse not being polite speech, right? It kind of feels a little bit risky because I can see that speech can cross a line to being violent speech, and so I'm just wondering how universities as institutions can balance this need for civil discourse with concerns about inclusivity and emotional safety, particularly for groups that experience marginalization and harm and the trauma from different kinds of speech.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, let me, it's an important question, and it's a question that, we were talking about this at lunch, that, by putting these sets of conversations in with student life and in the realm of community and inclusion, it invites this question. Is actually a place to work out constructively an answer to this question. So I'm not going to provide the final say on this, but I'll just, I'll say a couple of things that might be helpful that I'm sure you all will think about, long after my visit is over. The first thing to begin with is, civic discourse, not civil, really emphasizes community and belonging. The types of things in speech that get most contentious, in my experience, are those where belonging, the question is, do I belong, right? Those are the ones that are most difficult. And so belonging and community is very, very important, and that's why, for often in classes and seminars, before we get to the real contentious stuff, you experience and establish the belonging of all the members in that group, right? Because when who's in and who's out becomes the question, it becomes really, really hard to have a conversation. Then it becomes about power. It doesn't become about speech. So that's the first thing to say, is that that civil discourse is tied up with this question of belonging. That's just what it means if you're in a community, right? And so you want to be sensitive to that as you're framing the conversation. But second of all, there can be some interesting. Sometimes this belonging and inclusion can work in ways that you wouldn't expect. Sometimes by having hard conversations, especially if you're committed to them from the very beginning, it can actually build community, interestingly enough. When people begin to know you and know your views, maybe disagree with them and know things about you, but they still accept you, that's powerful. That's really, really powerful. Third thing, how do you do this? Well, you get to know each other as people. You get to know each other, your stories. You get to know each other, your families. You get to know things about each other. You get to know the kind of things outside, the things that beyond what divides you. Fourth thing I'll say about this, and this is just, you can think about what to do with this, but I'm going to do something with it. But there is this phenomenon of, you mentioned trauma, of, you might say, concept creep, whereas, sort of in the 70s, 80s, trauma was tied more to sort of, objective sort of facts, and then it becomes more psychologized, and so it becomes a little more elastic, much more elastic. Jonathan Haidt and Lukyanov make a lot of this. So we have trauma that begins to move into words, right? And so what do we do with that, right? So what am I going to do with it? Well, I've never been the one to say that, words can't, there's no way, and under no condition in which words can't do harm. Think about it this way. Think about bullying, right? Bullying is not permitted in a civil discourse community, because if you're trying to give the gift of free speech to one another, to have words that shut down the other person is incompatible with, inviting them to join in the conversation. So I think we could be very clear about some types of speech that within certain conditions, like in the classroom where you're looking at truth and therefore you need all voices at the table. If I have some speech that is designed to shut you down because of your identity, your background, your experience, that keeps you from making your argument, I think we can rule that out. Then the last thing I'm going to say on this is, and this is where I'm going to play on a metaphor, and we'll see what you think about this metaphor. I've tried this out. It's helpful for some of my students. And this does have to do with where I take the metaphor of play in sports and injury. Because with the increase in trauma, it does get into to injury and experience. And what I say there is, when you're doing a sports game, basketball, injuries on the team, injuries can be real. They can happen. And some people, because of things that have happened to them, may not be able to participate like for a moment. But the idea in sports, when you're injured, is to rehab and get back in the game. And also the idea is if somebody gets injured for the game to go on, you don't want to shut it down. And so you can be aware of people's backgrounds, their experiences, while also wanting to get them in the game, to keep them in the game. I had an example of this that worked really well. I was just sharing this metaphor with a student, and I was teaching a class, and we were about to get into death. And she had just had a very traumatic experience with the death of a loved one. And we went out to lunch. And she said, I don't know if I can do this. My brother just recently died, and it's very traumatic. Can I talk about death? And I gave her the basketball metaphor, and I said, this experience is individual, as you're dealing with this. I don't know where you are in the grief process. I know that ultimately we want to get you back in the game to be able to talk about this if you can. But, if you have to set this out, it's okay. My mom had actually recently died from cancer, and I shared that with her, and I said, I'm gonna do it, I think. But you don't have to. And she ended up actually doing it, and it became, engaging in discussion became a very powerful moment for her. So I share that because I think, trying to find a framework to be able to give people to be able to work through their subjective experiences, realizing that there is some subjectivity, I think is important. And then the last thing I'll say on it's such an important question, and I'm giving you all some ways of thinking through this without giving you a definitive answer. The final thing I'll say too is what is the role of personal experiences and backgrounds in this? And I'm not somebody that's going to say you shouldn't draw on personal experience or backgrounds, because this is human work. Right? But I do think that as we're talking about issues across difference, for your personal experience or background to be the final arbitrator makes it really, really difficult. Because then it means that there's no way to get back to the other people. And if you go really deep and really personalized, because all of our experiences are so very, very different, we can actually get to the point where we're just, to use Tocqueville's word, alone, shut up in the solicitude of our own hearts. So I think that experience has to have a role in these conversations, but also can we reach up and out to engage with others who have different experiences? Can we find shared reasons, shared identities, whether it's a citizen or, and this is why the liberal arts is so important in all of this, so important, because not every member of our classes are citizens, right? This human condition that we're all in from cradle to grave that's, so hard but so glorious, we can all connect over that. So I'm constantly wanting to say, and this is why we have to be patient, right, with each other, and let's take the journey. Let's take the journey together down into the depths of our experience, but back up into our common humanity. Let's be patient with each other. Let's listen to each other and see where we get.
Thank you. I have one last question, and I'll open it up to the audience to pose some questions. Readiness. So you talked about people who have some core understanding and skill for how to facilitate civil discourse in their classes. But the opportunity to engage in a civil dialogue about a difficult topic can occur in any class at any time. And you have many professors who are not ready for it, and who will facilitate it in a way that causes harm, who will shut it down when it could actually happen very fluidly. So what do you think, what kinds of institutional support can we offer to every faculty who may or may not be doing a civil discourse course, but still needs to have the skills to engage and facilitate those conversations?
Great question. Another great question. So far as I know, none of us have taken, those of us who are professors, we all go to graduate school, and none of us have taken Civil Discourse 700 as a graduate. I would love such a course, actually, to be put on the books by people that have thought about this, and for graduate schools to begin to have civil discourse programming. But until we get this day, my team and I over the past couple years have been working on some solutions for faculty, and it actually is the same kind of thing that I mentioned to student incentives to try to reverse them for faculty as well. One of my colleagues began to teach a course, I don't know, in around 2019, 2020, 2021, how to think in an age of political polarization. And he wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was all about his students just having very constructive conversations about all the difficult challenges. And immediately we got bombarded by faculty saying, I really want to do this. Because remember what I said earlier about the students, how they really want this? You'd be surprised how many faculty want to do this too. And they would say things like, I really want to teach a class like that, but how do I know my chair is going to let me, or my dean? I'm a little nervous. I want to teach a class like that, but what in the world do I put on the syllabus? What if I don't have the right balance? Or what if I don't have articles that are going to lead to productive conversations? Or they would say, I really want to teach a course like this, but what if conversations go off the rail and there's lots of hurt feelings, bruised feelings, and the class becomes a train wreck? And so we started to have a series of summer faculty seminars, first at Duke, now at UNC. And we've now had about 120 faculty that have gone through these seminars. We always have a couple of people that do civil discourse from some different perspectives, and we collect syllabi that show best practices. And when the faculty come, there's a stipend, but part of what they have to do is they have to get their chair to sign off on it. So they have to teach a course in the next 3 semesters, but then they also get to talk with other professors from around the country. Professors from all sorts of schools, by the way. We want, by purpose, we want people from red states and blue states, from public and private, from flagship schools and campuses of systems, community colleges, where this is a major opportunity in community colleges. And we get together and we work together on best practices. And after a while, we've now had about 120 or so faculty that have done this. And so you start to have a network of people that you can go to for help. Oh, wow, a conversation went off the rails. How do I recover? Well, you have some people you can call who have managed this before. And so I really think that, that's been a wonderful thing. We're hoping to grow that and expand that. And I think one of the things that we hope to do as faculty begin to do this seminar is they can then help work with their campuses to be able to help do things like this at their campus back home. So it really is a community approach. It requires a lot of people collecting their experiences. And I'll end just by saying this: for faculty, it's just like as students. We need each other, and we can't do it alone. And so that's, our intervention. And ultimately, I think, for campuses, yeah, finding people that, do this well. And then, yeah, for those, I was talking to a faculty member here today about their great graduate program and their unit. Well, hey, maybe have your graduate school, your graduate program offer a certificate to future teachers, future professors on how to do civil discourse.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jed, for a very wonderful conversation. I want to open it up.
Yep. Thank you, Liz.
So we're going to, I'm going to walk around. So raise your hand if you have a question, and I'm sure Jed will be happy to answer. So you'll help me get my steps. All right. And if you can just say your name and if you're a student, faculty, or community member.
I'm Steve Einhorn. I'm a student, but not here. By the way, thank you very much, Dr. Atkins, for your comments. I thought they were very well taken. And I have a question for you, but first I wanted to ask a question of the students here. I'm very interested in climate change. I've written up a book on it. And I'd like to know which students here have had in their classes a professor who stated some ideas relating to the climate change might not be a problem or a very minimal problem. Could you please raise your hand? Thank you. Okay, so I've written this book and I've worked on this for a while, and I've tried for 3 years to talk at this university on climate change. I've talked to professors, I've talked to deans, I've even talked to the chancellor. No one has been willing to have civil discourse with me on this topic for a class, and no one has been willing to debate. So the problem is, this is a settled science here at this university for most of the professors. And I am called a climate denier. And I'm told that this is the existential problem of our time. So my question to you is this: what should be done here with the university professors so that it would open up and have civil discourse? And you went to the university, you're at the University of North Carolina, so it's probably a similar situation there. So I'd like your opinion of what should be done so we can have civil discourse and debate here at this university on this topic. It's not the only topic, but it's the one I happen to be interested in. Thank you.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that question. Yeah, there's, this is one of, the challenging ones. I think, it seems like you've chatted with a lot of different people in the university. Sometimes the way to have a conversation is, certainly getting things in, classrooms. You have the faculty that, have the freedom over their curricula. Some ways a really good way to start a conversation is just by a forum or an event. That can often be a really good way to start a conversation and see who, who can show up. That can always be a good way to start a conversation around this. So often I suggest, when you're you want to get a conversation started on campus, begin with a public event, begin with a public conversation. Sometimes if you have campus alumni groups, for instance, that like to promote free discourse on campus, that can also be a good way to have a conversation across an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't write a book. Thank you, whoever wrote a book. My question is this. Walter Zimmerman, I'm an attorney, local here, community member, yes. My question is, what scares me over my now 35 years at law school is a seeming implied belief that people are too weak to hear free speech, or we want to shut down speech. When I was raised, the remedy for bad speech is more speech and good speech and working through it. And I fear that by stifling and shutting down, we don't get a flow of communication and ideas to let the bad float away and the good remain. And I'm just wondering if you have an opinion, because as the Italians said in 1511 and other people, mankind has been how mankind always is and will be. we're not going to cure that. We have to let the speech flow through so we see who's who and let ideas carry their own weight. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and this also dovetails to the last gentleman's question. I mean, I'm not a million in every sort of possible way, but John Stuart Mill, and some of you who are philosophers have read Mill. And Mill argues that it's really important for the truth-seeking enterprise of the university to be able to subject views, even views that the majority might think settled, right? So you mentioned the science, climate change, to debate. And what do you get by that? Well, what you get by that, according to Mill, is that you remember the arguments for it, even if you think that the view is disproven, and that way, says Mill, if you're right, you will be sharper and clearer in your understanding about the world, and each generation needs to work out the truth for themselves. So Mill would argue. So if Mill had to think about the climate science change question, he might say, well, even if the majority of people think that this is settled science, there might be, and that's why I mentioned the campus forum, there might be some virtue in having a discussion about it to see what's there, what's not there, and then you can at least emerge confident in your own views. So the Millian view for having a wide table is that it can help us move forward with progress, and also science can turn into dogma if you go through multiple generations without examining it, right? Because you get to the point where it's like, oh, well, we've settled this particular debate, and then you go through a couple of a generation or two, and you're like, well, why do I hold this view? Based on whatever the topic is. Well, maybe I hold the view not because I've looked at the evidence, not because I studied the science, but just because, a generation ago I was told that. So that would be kind of the Millian, John Stuart Mill. He's a British philosopher, 19th century British philosopher. That's the Millian argument to try to keep, these views on the table, even unpopular views, because or views that are in the minority, because that's how we hold ourselves. I say accountable, and make sure that we're really considering the evidence for the positions, pros and cons. So in some ways, I think following that last speaker's question, you're suggesting that there's reasons to want to keep views on the table, even if views that the majority of people or experts might feel is disproven.
And I'm hoping some more students are willing to ask some questions too.
Hello, Miriam Bohm, and I'm in the philosophy department, a professor. I wonder what you have to say about the problem when people cannot agree on what is a fact, what is evidence, what is a good source of information, what is reputable source. It would seem that when there is such disagreement about the basic question of what counts as a fact, what counts as an established fact, what's evidence, and so on, having a fruitful conversation would involve, it would have to be very, you would have to spend a lot of time to get clear on that question, or a great investment in teaching, and then the other person needs to be open to being taught, or you need to be open to being taught. And, I think when there is that basic fundamental disagreement about what is truth, what are facts, what is your recommendation as to how to proceed?
Yeah. Well, so what is truth is like the perennial philosophical question that everyone debates about. And I actually think that can be a great way to bring people together. The thing about the decline of Rome, to go back to that, is it's very interesting. It wasn't that people had different concepts and they just disagreed. It was that the Roman historians would point out, and the problem with the rhetoric was we didn't share the common language at all. We didn't even have the common terms for debate. We just don't. We're talking past each other. And when you're talking past each other, it just becomes impossible to make any kind of progress at all. What do? What do you do? Well, I'll give you one example of what we did at UNC through our program for public discourse. We had a conversation on transgender athletic participation. Now, the whole question about sex and gender identities, and it's very complicated, and it is one of these topics that if you pull, everybody in our society in all the spectrums, you're gonna have a really hard time just getting the vocabulary, getting common vocabulary. But what we did is we focused on a particular question. We got a couple of experts who studied, for instance, raised the question about fairness and athletic participation, had studied the impact of hormone change and athletic competition, and they disagreed, but they agreed on the terms of the disagreement, and they modeled a civil but disagreed conversation on a particular topic. And so what we thought is, well, just as we're moving out to be able to try to recapture that shared vocabulary, let's start in a place where we can still have some major disagreement, a major policy disagreement, but we can at least get a couple people who can speak to each other, and that'll be our first step, and then moving outward to try to draw more and more people in. So that's a start. And I think it's better than what Rome did, which was nothing, and then the Republic died. So, so I think it's important, even if we can't, it's important to have the conversation, to start the conversation, focus the conversation, and make a start, because the alternative is just unacceptable. Because if we can't talk together, we can't have a common life together. And if we can't have a common life together, we can't have a commonwealth or a republican form of government.
Hi, my name is Robert May. I work for Milwaukee County Transit System. So I noticed that I spend a lot of time watching what's going on social media, and a lot of conversations that are being had online and discourse, even in person, it seems manipulative in a way where you could be trying to engage in meaningful discussion with someone who wants to discuss, but not for the same reasons that you do. You may be seeking understanding. They may be seeking to get some ulterior motive out of the discussion. Like they may seem like to have some enjoyment out of annoying you, or like, oh, we see things differently, and I'm gonna, make you look stupid by saying stuff or speaking around the discussion instead of addressing it directly. And I noticed that discourages people from engaging with a whole community when it comes to having meaningful discussions. And then sometimes it scares people away from discussing at all and isolating themselves further. What do you have to say to those experiences, and how do you kind of combat that? I don't like using the word combat because it's like, but yeah, how do you deal with those type of experiences?
Yeah. Well, social media is a problem. That's the most obvious thing I've said of the night, in which we probably can find widespread agreement, regardless of your political backgrounds or perspectives. I have a former colleague named Christopher Bale, who runs the Polarization Lab at Duke, and he's done a lot of study on social media and polarization. Polarization did not start because of social media. Just study American history, and you'll see from the very founding we had disagreements, we had factions, go into, the Andrew Jackson era, going up to the Civil War, deep polarization. So polarization isn't a social media phenomenon at all, but it has social media has exasperated polarization. And what Bale has found is that a very small percentage of social media users drive the especially on, some forms of social media are worse than others at this. X is one that kind of, stands out as being more prone to this. But a small minority of users drives the vast amount of interactions and engagements. Well, what incentivizes you if you want to get a lot of followers? Well, you're incentivized by saying extreme things and by using hyperbole, which is not conducive to engaged conversation and constructive conversation. So what do you do? Well, there's a couple of different things that one can do. So the easiest solution is an old solution. It's like before you respond, you count to 10. The Roman Stoic Seneca wrote this book on anger, and I sometimes I'll quote this to my students in this regard. You count before you respond to something that makes you mad on the internet. Count to 10 backwards in Latin. That was what Seneca said to do. We'll do it in English, but count to 10 before you respond. Rest, and that can be really, really helpful. But there's also been some work. This is where I mentioned this person, Simon Cullen, who's working on AI. He's trying to think about some programs that can help people just begin to think about the types of language that you use and not respond for you, but give you options, for how you might respond in order to be more constructive rather than less constructive in your choice of language. So, so there's technological solutions and then there's human solutions. As a humanist, I'm always, all about the human solutions first, which is, don't respond when you're angry. If you're, realize that social media is going to have very limited utility for having conversations across difference, and don't try to make it do more than what it's meant to do. And recognize that the majority of things that are going to get a lot of traffic are going to be things that get a lot of traffic simply because they're going to try to, get under your skin, rouse you up, move you in some way. And so you might just have to, sort of detach yourself or use it with those kind of things in mind.
Hi, my name's Elijah. I'm studying neuroscience as a student here. I guess this is kind of just combining the last two questions on like how do you go about when people they don't accept the fact that you are bringing up reputable information, and how do you go about like discussing with others? So, because my thing is that I've been like doing research and like I just see others speaking on like the political state right now, and they just deny what's going on, or they just kind of like, they just deny it, right? And so my thing is, another thing I noticed was people kind of deny like there's like a history involved with everything going on right now. So for example, like there's Israel, people say, okay, well, October 7th was when it started, but really it's been going on since like the 1900s and before or whatever, right? And there's also people bring up like slavery and how, that was 400 years ago, but people don't realize it all builds up to now. Anyways, okay, so my thing is, you mentioned Charlie Kirk and like that whole situation. And I'm wondering your thoughts on, like, for example, I noticed that there was like many NFL teams that kind of spent giving like a minute of like recognition for him or whatever, but they don't bring up school shootings or anything else tragic like that. I'm wondering your thoughts, like why do these teams and large companies, they give their time to promote, like this individual, I personally think he spent his time just spewing hateful rhetoric, and people say, he was just voicing his opinion. I think it's so much deeper than that, especially when he has such like an audience that's super easy to persuade or like kind of give your opinions to, and then they kind of they spread it, so it just keeps on spreading. So people just say, he's just saying his opinion when it's just so much deeper than that. What's your thoughts on these companies kind of speaking out on him and like, oh, he was, you know, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, but not to all the others that are like suffering through much worse tragedies on a daily basis than he did?
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment. And as I think about sort of the sum totality of your comments, I think you made a case for liberal arts-based civic education in terms of you're thinking about the importance of history, and you're talking about the importance of shared reason within that history together, understanding the history of conflicts, understanding the history of how things came about. So the first thing I would say is, I think you make a case for why it's important to have the type of civil discourse should be at its most effective, tied to a type of liberal education that invites members of a common community to reason together, based on shared investigation into truths, historical, philosophical, civic. Second of all, mentioning sort of the social media stuff and the fragmentation of knowledge, we have a really interesting phenomenon that's called the loss of trust in our institutions. I don't know if it's interesting is the right word. It's a phenomenon, and it's across the board with the exception of the military, but the university certainly has declined in trust. Congress has declined in trust. The Supreme Courts have declined in trust, but also our news media has declined in trust. It's very, very low, maybe the lowest, certainly it's the lowest of all those things that I mentioned. And so what do you do with that? What do you do when, people get their news sources in very individualized ways that are tailored to their own experience and background? It's not, so I'll give you again two things. One, something you can do now, and one, is something that other enterprising people have to do with restoring the trust in our institutions. Things that you can do now is make sure that you're getting your news from a number of sources, right? And I think that's one way, to try to ensure that you're hearing different sides, different perspectives. The other way is there's somebody that I've gotten to know who has started a center for integrity in news reporting to give prizes and awards to people across all of, Walter Hussman is his name, to give prizes and awards across all the different types of media, print and radio and television and podcasts, people that practice integrity and fairness and balance in their reporting. And I hope by doing that, by highlighting and rewarding people that do this well, that eventually it's one way to begin to incentivize others to do it that way, and then thereby restore the trust in our institution of journalism. So I think so it's a challenge. I think this one is the most challenging, right? The online stuff, the fragmentation of the media, and I think one has to be institutional, and it is tied to deep changes within our institutions, and can we do something there? And then the personal level is just trying to yourself engage and try to read what other people are reading, right? And what you're reading, and try to have a number of different sources. And that just means it's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of work for us. So those would be the two things I'd say.
We're at time now, and I just really appreciate all the questions and the engagement. I'm super excited for us to actually be able to be in dialogue with each other at our tables. So thank you again, Dr. Atkins, for your talk and your responses. And we're going to move on to our next piece.
Is it on now? Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. You've clearly given us much to think about, and I hope much to be talking about in the dinner dialogues that are soon to follow. So we are going to have a little bit of a break. I imagine that most of us need a little bit of a stretch break. When we return, there will be dialogues happening at the tables. We have 17 facilitators who are prepared, ready to go. They are seated, currently, they're seated at tables 2 through 18. However, as I've been looking around the room, walking around the room, I can also see we've had enough no-shows that I think I'm going to need to do a little bit of creative reshuffling. And so some of the facilitators will get paired up together at tables. We won't have quite as many as 17 tables. So here's what I would ask first of the facilitators. Take a look at your own table and please make a note of how many people are at your table. I've also been doing this and am thinking about how we might move some people, merge tables, et cetera, et cetera. And facilitators, let me just say up front, I appreciate your grace and flexibility as we do a little improvising on the fly. My goal is to make sure that there are at least 5 people at each table so we can have robust dialogue. So facilitators, right now, please take a note, how many people at your table. And then I'm also going to ask that the facilitators be the first to go through the buffet line and get food. And then come back here, come to your tables, but don't necessarily get too attached to your tables because I may move you. For everyone here who is not a facilitator, this is also your time to take a stretch break. If you need a restroom, there are both men's and women's restrooms in that direction. If any of you would like a gender-inclusive restroom, then you can find that on the first floor all the way to the east side of this floor. In addition, let me encourage you to take a few minutes to look at the information table, which has various flyers of upcoming opportunities to be in dialogue, to be in conversation, including one, in fact, on AI happening next Friday, if that's a topic of interest to you. In addition, let me recommend that you take a moment to go to room 119 to take a look at the civil dialogue table. And then after a little bit of a stretch break, the buffet is laid out in the MLK Lounge, which is just behind this room. The food there is labeled, so hopefully it will be pretty clear if you have particular dietary restrictions. I will just highlight a couple of things. We have gluten-free pasta for those who need that option. There are also some impossible meatballs, particularly for any vegans who want to add those to the marinara sauce. So those two options, they're kind of at the end of the table, almost to the desserts. I want to make sure you don't miss them, but also please leave those two things for the people who requested gluten-free or vegan options. Until the very end, and then if there's more and you want to go back and take some. But please prioritize making sure that people get their needs met. The other thing I'll mention, if you have nut allergies, there is only one of the dessert bars that contains nuts, and again, that's marked on the card. But they did alert me, like, they can't guarantee there's no cross-contamination. So if your allergies are severe, be hesitant about the dessert bars. I think those are all of the logistical details I wanted to cover. So stand up, walk around a little bit, take a bit of a break, and then go through the line and get food. And we will be back here for dialogues. I'm hoping those will start no later than 6 p.m.